According to Karl Marx, the socialist revolution was right around the corner, as the lives of the workers would clearly get worse and worse and worse, until, with nothing left to lose, nothing left to live for, utterly miserable, revolution would explode the old bourgeois world. And yet, it did not. Why is that? Why was that? Did education and mass literacy have anything to do with it? These and other questions will be answered right after this. I'm Professor Jerome Markenberg, and I've been teaching a wide variety of history courses at colleges across this country for the past 30 years. In this video, I'm going to tell you about how and why universal, compulsory, free education became the norm in Europe and America. How industrialization allowed an increasingly literate population access to hitherto expensive books and newspapers, thus disseminating ideas about democracy and in turn strengthening it, despite Marx saying this would never happen, and how a variety of other communication technologies, namely the penny post, telephone, phonograph, and radio, radically transformed the relationship between city folk and country folk and enabled the rise of mass culture. At the end, I'll have the wrap-up quote on this video. But first, make sure to click like, share, and especially subscribe, and that little bell thingy, so I continue to bring you more great videos just like this one. A great change came about when, in the 19th century, the governments of Europe and America began, at great cost, to provide free, public, universal, and compulsory schooling, in part because they thought it necessary for an industrializing society, in part because of romantic nationalism, because a country is not a nation, they thought, unless all in it spoke, read, and wrote a common tongue and had a common national identity, obtainable only through education. While many parents at first opposed education, because after all, who will do the chores? Who will bring in the extra penny? As the use of national weights and measures, written contracts, invoices, leases, accounts, sundry legal documents, and currency became common, parents came to appreciate a child who could read, write, and reckon. England led the way in 1880 with a law requiring compulsory attendance for all children, boys and girls. Quite amazing when you think about it. Rural and urban, between the ages of 5 and 13. Penalizing employers who hire children without the diplomas granted at age 13. And, by the way, also strengthening ideas against child labor. The child is in school, how can he or she labor? In the mills, the factories, or the mines. For the child, the diploma became a symbol of adulthood, becoming his and especially her ticket to a better life, perhaps as a shop assistant or bank clerk, perhaps even granting access to higher education, from which, as a physician or lawyer, one could graduate into the lower reaches of the upper classes. This was made immensely easier by advances in papermaking and printing in the mid-19th century, which made books and newspapers financially affordable by all. This started with the 1801 Fourdrinier papermaking machine, as you see here, which did all the papermaking steps automatically, and Charles Fennerty's 1844 discovery of a process to turn wood pulp into paper. Meanwhile, Frederick Koenig's 1810 steam press could print 1,100 two-sided sheets an hour, and Richard March Hoe's 1847 rotary press put type on a revolving cylinder, which tripled output, lowering cost. You see the two men here and their machines. Then, Ottmar Mergenthaler's Linotype machine of 1885 allowed newspapers to achieve mass circulations of well over 1 million by the year 1900. Plus, in 1819, we have the invention of lithography, and the development of photography after 1827 enabled reproduction and mass distribution of visual images cheaply. Between the 1850 invention of the pencil and the fountain pen in 1880, cheap paper and the rotary press, lithography and photography, books, newspapers, diaries, catalogs, and letters were common by the year 1900. The invention of the typewriter by Remington in 1874, this of course being the very first typewriter, what it looked like, and you can see everyone, mostly women, typing away. Anyway, the invention of the typewriter furthered this communications revolution. The appearance of the penny post by the mid-19th century, first in Britain, where letters could be sent anywhere in the country for a penny paid in advance. Previously, you might have to have the receiver. The sender doesn't pay, though the receiver of the mail had to pay, or could refuse it. This revolutionized communications, especially for the working classes. Another revolution was Alexander Graham Bell's invention of the telephone in 1876. As common people, not just businesses as Bell first expected, but common people used it to talk for hours on end, even if perhaps they lived in the same apartment building right across the hall from each other. Though farmers also used it to get weather reports and prices, or to call for a doctor when in need. In America, by 1920, there were 123 telephones for every 1,000 people. But in some areas it was still rare, and I'll show you why. This is a photograph of when Bell Telephone came to St. Anne's High School in Chicago. This was from my picture from my mother's yearbook, 1946, or was it 47, where they had to come and show the high school students what a phone was about and how to dial it. True story. The phonograph was invented by Thomas Edison in 1877, with playback on one-sided cylinders. But Emil Berliner, there he is, invented in 1889 the two-sided 78 RPM shellac disc, led to its widespread popularity, so the Victrola gramophone became the norm by 1918. Radio, developed first as wireless telegraphy for ship-to-shore or ship-to-ship in 1897 by Mr. Marconi, as shown here. And soon armies, navies, embassies, shipping companies, and newspapers bought equipment. But it was not until the 1920s that the Radio Corporation of America, RCA, developed equipment that transmitted voice and music over the air. All of which, in conjunction with universal, compulsory, and free public education, spread a national culture, so that, as we see here, even peasants began to dress, act, think, even look like city folk, which had never, ever happened before. This was part of the Industrial Revolution's radical transformation of life, which saw not only the rise of a middle class, of bankers, lawyers, teachers, physicians, shopkeepers, clerks, civil servants, mechanics, artisans, even salesmen, but also with more and better jobs at regular wages, a literate blue-collar voting class, whose customs and desires signaled the rise of a mass culture, which, contrary to all expectations, diffused much revolutionary agitation as life became better, more enjoyable, and more prosperous for everyone. The wrap-up quote: "If one class possesses all the wealth and all the education, while the residue of society remains ignorant and poor, it matters not by what name the relation between them may be called, as the latter will in fact and in truth be the servile dependents and subjects of the former. But if education be equally diffused, it will draw property after it by the strongest of all attractions. For such a thing never did happen, and never can happen, as that an intelligent and practical body of men should be permanently poor. Education, beyond all other devices of human origin, is the great equalizer of the conditions of men. It gives each man the independence and the means by which he can resist the selfishness of other men. It does better than to disarm the poor of their hostility towards the rich. It prevents being poor." Horace Mann, 1848. So, let me know what you think of this quote in the comment section below. Also, what you liked about this video, and what other historical topics or subjects you'd like to see in future videos. Be sure to click like, share, and especially subscribe, as it will help me bring you more great videos just like this one. And click on that little bell thingy so you'll know when the next History Waits for No One video is posted. If you want to know more, there are recommended studies on this topic in the description below, along with other ways to connect with me. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the past.